In its most basic form is just assigning value to something. It is looking at something and determining the value based on a set of standards that either you determine or they're predetermined kind of values and standards. And so, evaluation of livestock is important because basically it's the original form of how we determine progress. We could look at trends in the livestock industry based on evaluation techniques. We could look at how much our animals were worth and value our animals based on evaluation.
Welcome to the Swine Canada podcast. I'm Dan Columbus and I will be your host for this episode. And with me today, I have Will Taylor, who is an assistant teaching professor and livestock judging coach at Iowa State University. So welcome to the show, Will.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I think it should be a good episode. Before we get into the topic today, though, I just will ask you to introduce yourself and kind of give everybody an idea of your journey so far.
I grew up in central Indiana and grew up with a 4-H and FFA background. So I had the opportunity to show pigs and sheep competitively at the county fair and state fair level, and then found a love and passion for livestock judging along the way. And so that took me to Lincoln Land Community College, where I competed on a college livestock judging team. And then I went to Western Illinois University, where I was also on a judging team. And then when I got done at Western, I was able to start a master's at Iowa State under the direction of Dr. Ken Stalder. And we looked at coal sow value and coal sow health and welfare. And then I completed that in 2021 and then started a PhD where I look at nutritional deficiency and locomotion scoring under the direction of Dr. Juan Steibel and Dr. Stephen Lonergan. During that period of time, during my grad school, I started as an assistant livestock judging coach at Iowa State in tandem with my graduate work, and then transitioned into a interim head coach position. And now I'm currently, as you said, an assistant teaching professor and livestock judging coach here at Iowa State. And so enjoy judging shows and enjoy being a part of the livestock industry.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty busy life you have going on there. I can't imagine doing all of that and trying to do your PhD at the same time.
We don't make a lot of progress on everything. We just make a little progress on it all the time.
As long as there's progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, so the topic today is going to be very much related to your research and specifically looking at livestock evaluation. I think we'll look at how all that fits in with the different parts. I think to start, when we say livestock evaluation, what are the types of things that you're looking at? And we'll start there, and then we'll go into then how that applies to other aspects.
So you get the neat opportunity. We are at the beginning of our semester here at Iowa State, and so I've been introducing livestock evaluation to students in my ANSI 3050 course, which would be for juniors. And so basically, evaluation in its most basic form is just assigning value to something. It is looking at something and determining the value based on a set of standards that either you determine or they're predetermined kind of values and standards. And so evaluation of livestock is important because basically it's the original form of how we determine progress. We could look at trends in the livestock industry based on evaluation techniques. We could look at how much our animals were worth and value our animals based on evaluation. And so there's a lot of different components of livestock evaluation. I specifically look at locomotion mostly in my research. But as a judging coach, I'm looking at learning to evaluate the animal to be able to determine which are phenotypically the best in a show kind of setting. My research is more what functional and locomotion traits and values are important for animals' welfare, health, and value.
Yeah. So when we're looking at locomotion, we can focus on that one. What would be certain traits that you would be looking at then in that evaluation?
Cool. So as far as locomotion goes, Most of my research currently uses strictly locomotion scores. So we use a locomotion scoring scale that's 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 is a desirable score. 1 would be what I call has some presence of spine, has some presence, or the pig has some struggles in terms of movement from their their levelness of spine standpoint. A 2 means that they are physically holding a leg, or something is causing them to be unable to um, move freely. And then a 3 would be they're unable to even get up. And so, from a locomotion standpoint, I think that this locomotion score is a culmination of a lot of different parts of evaluation. So, the animal kind of culminates in this score that describes how they move. But I will tell you that I like to evaluate their angles, the angles of their skeleton. We talk a lot about form and function. So, what forms make for the function we desire? And so, the pig needs to have an appropriate angle to their shoulder blade and their knee to allow their spine to sit in them appropriately. And then they should have the appropriate angle to their hock and hind leg and hip to allow them once again to move appropriately. So basically, I would say, as far as locomotion evaluation, I'm looking at their angles to determine how fluid their movement can be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So is that like a visual assessment, or do you have tools like cameras or something like that that you're using? I'm thinking from the research side of it, maybe not so much on the judging side, but like how are you actually measuring those angles in addition to the locomotion?
That is an awesome question that tees up everything that we do and kind of the directions of where we're headed. Evaluation is to me is an art form, right? And to be able to evaluate is a very it's a learned trait. It's a practice trait. It's something that we spend hours talking about how to evaluate, but in that it is a very subjective measure, right? And so everyone evaluates things differently. Everybody characterizes things differently, and everybody understands the skeleton of an animal differently. So I think that I use almost exclusively visual evaluation to this point. And I think that that's important because I think the human eye can discern differences. The problem with the human eye is, even amongst ourselves, we are not repeatable, and how we evaluate things at one time can be different from another time. And so it's important that we kind of standardize that. And I think that's where cameras and computer vision can really assist us, right? Is the computer doesn't change its mind. The computer doesn't have a bad day and read something different, and do things that are out of character. The computer does the same thing every single time. And so, if we can train computer vision systems to evaluate skeleton, it may not always be the perfect answer, but it's at least a consistent answer, which I think has value as far as locomotion evaluation goes.
Yeah, it might be like that additional measure, but you still need the human side of it to really look at that and say that, yeah, that's appropriate.
Which I think that is that would kind of be my opinion about a lot of these technologies. They're awesome, and we need to use them, but I don't think that we as practitioners can view them as a replacement for the human, but rather a supplement for the human, and something that can assist us rather than replace us.
So it might seem something that's obvious, but I want to know your opinion of how the evaluation could be used to improve swine production specifically.
I think that's a question I was really looking forward to. That's a question that was posed to me in my preliminary exams by Dr. Laura Greiner, and I think that a lot of people would agree across our industry that we have a problem with sow longevity. And if you look at the research of my former mentor and major professor, Dr. Ken Stalder, his work was really around that and focused around better understanding sow longevity. And so I think that there is a direct link between evaluation and skeletal angles in sow longevity. And I think if we better select and understand how pigs are shaped and how our pigs' skeletons are built, we can more effectively decide which animals will last the longest in our herd. And so I think that really the true application of livestock evaluation is that the understanding the pig's skeleton and understanding how the pig is built and what that operationally means for longevity. Because I've had the opportunity to be on farms, and I think every single farm would have a different ideal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what works in your farm may not be the perfect ideal in my farm. But if we can train people to evaluate and understand and say, wow, this sow was long lasting and she's built like this, I should select more sows that have the same angle to her shoulder, the same angle to her hock, and the same locomotion score, then I think we can achieve longer lasting sows. And so I think that's an interesting part of where evaluation can sit in terms of the industry.
So you mentioned selection, which I think is an obvious one, right? If you have a sow that's not doing very well, then clearly you don't want to use her to breed replacement breeding stock. Genetics companies might want to look at that. Are there other ways that this could be implemented when looking at your production, or is it mainly are you looking at the genetic selection?
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about, or we have talked to this point a lot about skeleton and locomotion and how that's used. My master's research was focused around body condition score, and so body condition score would additionally be an evaluation technique. And understanding the relationship between muscle and fat in animals, I think, is really, really important. And so I think evaluation is a daily trait that comes down to simple questions like, should I feed this animal more or should I feed this animal less? And what implications does that have for her production in the next 3 months? And so I think that helping people understand that relationship is very important. And there's a lot of great tools already out there. I've had the opportunity to use the BCS caliper quite a bit, and I think it is a very effective tool. Once again, I would tell you, as far as evaluation goes, it takes a lot of work with the caliper and determining what your ideal is on your farm to figure out where your sow's productivity is best. And so I think that's an important part of kind of what we do is being able to evaluate and say that animal is good structured, or that animal is over conditioned, or that animal is under conditioned. And I think that that's where I kind of play a role and really find exciting value in this industry.
So you talk about, the amount of feed, but I think one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked, especially when we're talking about sows, is specific nutritional differences, maybe, or issues that might be cropping up. So maybe just your comments on whether locomotion can be, or body condition can be used to diagnose, say, deficiencies or excesses, or if you are seeing other issues where nutrition could have an impact on longevity, and specifically when we're talking about, like, say, the locomotion and body condition.
Cool, very good. So that kind of plays into my PhD and dissertation research. And so what that is, and kind of to describe that, we took 3 different stages of the finishing portion of pigs, and we have taken pigs that were already nutritionally challenged. Calcium and phosphorus levels specifically were what were altered in those swine diets, and we were able to take pigs on diets that were appropriate in terms of phosphorus levels, and then deficient according to NRC in terms of phosphorus levels. And what we did there is we looked to see if locomotion was an indicator of what the levels those pigs were. And if basically, if we could scientifically quantify at what point locomotion changes are being displayed in pigs that are deficient. So what I think that does is in terms of application is it allows farmers, pig farmers, and people in barns to be able to observe locomotion and wonder if that is the first cause of what is happening, especially if you see mass locomotion changes, right? Because we know calphos and phosphorus specifically have implications on bone growth and bone development, and then bone development has implications on locomotion. So we looked at kind of the overall relationship of those three, and that's kind of, I guess, what the focus of my PhD research is. I think that there's a lot of applications for being able to use evaluation techniques if we're able to say that we statistically significantly know that there is a link between this nutritional deficiency and evaluation technique.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's come up, especially when it's calcium and phosphorus requirements, has been our traditional crate housed sows versus loose sow housed in gestation, and whether those change. And then, specifically with locomotion, and whether or not we are having animals with better conformation and locomotion in either of those housing systems. Is that something that you've looked into, or, I mean, maybe you have an opinion on it at least?
I would tell you that that is not something that I have looked into, but because of my reading and research around kind of housing and things of that nature, I definitely I would. I'll put it this way. My opinion would be I would be really interested to see the differences in housing style and locomotion scores and ability for pigs to stay sound, because I actually think you could, in my opinion, make a strong argument either way for both ways being more friendly from a locomotion standpoint. Because when I think of group housing, I think of aggression and pigs injuring each other and being aggressive toward one another, and then you have a higher instance of injuries versus in a stall housing setting. Do the pigs, is there an ideal locomotion or an ideal kind of angle that allows pigs to most adequately get up and down in a stall housing setting? But you wonder what their locomotion scores would be like without a lot of recreational movement.
So you've been working through this research for a while now. I'm just wondering if there were any preliminary results that you'd want to share, or any, especially if there was something that shocked you that you kind of weren't expecting when it came up.
So as we get into kind of the first section, we looked at finishing pigs and we looked at nursery pigs. I call them nursery pigs, early finishing and late finishing, and so I think that those are pretty good representatives. I guess the nursery pigs would be on average between 5 and 9 kilos. Early finishing would be 13 to 40 kilos, and late finishing would be 70 to 120 kilos. And so what we saw is, number one, nutritional deficiency did not change bone density in nursery or late finishing. And so therefore, much not to our surprise, we did not see changes in locomotion. Early finishing, so that range of 13 to 40 kilos, we saw a lot of changes in bone density based on nutritional deficiency, as well as a lot of changes in locomotion score, and the probability and odds of a certain locomotion score being represented. And so I think that's really interesting. And I think that there's some far-reaching kind of questions to be answered based off those findings, because then you wonder, first off, why nursery pigs are not responding, or why nursery pigs did not have bone density changes, And I think the biggest question that raised, at least in my mind, is during that late finishing period, is tissue accretion change? If bone density is not changing, is tissue accretion changing? And we did not look at that.
That sounds like another project. That'd be very interesting, right? Like, is that the area that's priority for skeletal development, right? And that's where we need to focus. It's an interesting time or life stage, right? That you wouldn't kind of expect it then.
And in my research, you would expect locomotion changes to be the most apparent in late finishing, because the pig is the heaviest, and so I would equate it, not to oversimplify it, but if you have a vehicle that has structural problems, the tires and the frame aren't appropriate, the more weight you put on it, the more the problems are going to be apparent, right? And so you kind of have to wonder, why didn't we see those stark changes in locomotion and late finishing?
A lot of great information in the episode, but before we let you go, just ask you a take-home message, or one kind of final message to our listeners.
I think that if I were to summarize everything we talked about, I think that the importance of humans that are trained to evaluate, I think, will always be relevant in our industry. And I think that we can use a lot of technological advances in computer technologies that really can supplement what humans are able to accomplish. But I still think that understanding the animal, and people that have true stockmanship ability and understanding of the animal, will always be really relevant to keeping us profitable, productive, and keeping the animals in good shape. And so I would say, understanding evaluation and understanding how animals are supposed to be built is really important for our industry.
Yeah, sounds good. So we have our 3 standard questions. So 3 more that I'm going to ask before I let you off the hook.
I've been looking forward to this.
Okay, good.
It's time for our famous 3. Swine Veterinary Partners comprises 4 well-established clinics across Canada: Precision Veterinary Services, Premier SHP, Demeter, Ontario, and Demeter, Quebec.
Our first question: favorite swine-related resource?
The one that I have enjoyed reading the most is actually probably Diseases of Swine, and getting into that and kind of understanding the diseases. But I think there's a lot of good production advice in there too. So Diseases of Swine would probably be the one I've enjoyed the most.
The next one, a favorite book or resource outside of pigs and agriculture?
That one, that's the one I thought about this morning, actually. So there's a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And so he's a Navy SEAL, and it just talks about being able to take ownership of all the things that go on in your life. And making sure as a leader you have ownership over what's going on. And so I think that would be easily my favorite.
I'm gonna have to look up that one. I haven't heard of that, but that sounds interesting, because there seems to be a lot of people that like to not take ownership. To put it,
it's if you don't have time to read the whole book, you have to watch his TED Talk. It's one of the most powerful TED Talks, where he tells a story about the impetus of the whole book.
Yeah. Oh, great.
At least do that. It takes 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Perfect. And then our last one, when you look back at leaders, mentors, producers, whatever that you've worked with, what is a characteristic that the successful ones seem to all share?
I think that's a really great question. As I think through mentors and people that have had a great influence on me, they all understand the value of people, and they understand the value of surrounding yourself with the right people. They understand the value of making people feel like they're valued, and helping to understand people, I think, is a very important characteristic of successful people.
Definitely. People are important. AI is not taking over the world yet.
Not yet. Give it another year.
Not yet. Okay. Well, it's been great having you on the show. Like I said, lots of good information, and definitely. So thanks again for coming on and joining us.
Cool. Thank you.